who are working behind the scenes as well. Thank you, Nicole, for opening up for us and for your unwavering support, Dr. Gray, and to all of the panelists. We are honored and humbled to be in the midst of such great champions of justice. And with that being said, the purpose of this panelist tonight is to, number one, to discuss and to share and to expose ADOS, to inform and to empower those who are listening, those who are watching. There are so many that still have yet to hear about ADOS, and we want to educate the world about ADOS. Secondly, to see how we can collaborate and work together in our quest to deal with this beast called injustice. And I believe that we can do more together than apart. I'll leave you with this. Dr. King stated that we're on this global village together. We're citizens of a global economy, and America is becoming more diverse. One time it was just one particular predominant race, but it's becoming very diverse. And in the process of that, blackdemographics.com is highlighting how the economic disparities of blacks have fallen to the bottom of the totem pole. The first group is white wealth. Secondly is Asian wealth. Third is Latino wealth. And then you come to what is called a mixture of wealth, and we fall at the bottom of the totem pole. And so without wealth empowerment, education empowerment, we will never be free. And so we are here to challenge the systems, and we're going to work together to do that. And so with that being stated, let me stop right there and turn it back over to our moderator, Reverend Darrell Gray.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler. We want to invite Pastor Dr. Kevin Cosby, who is also one of the founding members of ADOS, to also make an opening statement.
Marlon informed us he's going to be late, Dr. Gray, okay. And so we'll bring him back in when he's able to chime in. He did inform us he's going to be running behind.
All right. Is Dr. Carnell on? Dr. Yvette Carnell, has she joined us?
I'm here.
Excellent. So as one of the co-founders of ADOS, I think that we're right on. As Dr. Tyler indicated, this is an opportunity tonight for us to discuss how we build alliances. And Dr. King made a statement that we build alliances based upon necessity and not necessarily desirability, meaning that if we can find a common goal, it doesn't matter what our differences are. I've heard you speak previously in Philadelphia, so I know you have substance and strength. And so we'll ask you if you would at least begin the discussion as one of the co-founders, ADOS, the origin of ADOS, the mission, the why.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I'm so happy to be talking, and I'm always happy when I'm talking to the church, because I do believe this is a moment of resurrection, right? Somebody said in the comments, and I repeat it all the time, that somebody said either Yvette Carnell is preaching, the eulogy of ADOS or the resurrection. And so what I prefer is the resurrection. And I believe the church, especially the church, not just the Church of Jesus Christ, but the experience of ADOS within that speaks specifically to resurrection. So I'm very happy to be here to have that conversation. And what we talk about, is very interesting. We have a book club, and the book that we're reading now we're talking about Cass, right? And it's very interesting to me that we talk about the Jewish community and they got reparations, even though the Nazis used how ADOS were being mistreated as like their blueprint, and we have gotten nothing. And so the poverty, we see the wealth of white America and those who have been made white, right? Those who have been gifted that, because that's what it is. We see that every day in terms of what they get to do and what they have access to. Well, if the wealth is still in the system, the poverty is too. And what that means is that a debt is owed. We were supposed to have 40 acres and a mule we would have been the agricultural powerhouse of America. When you talk about who sells oranges, who sells grapes, who sells everything to everybody, that would have been ADOS's franchise. And we were locked out of that. And timing matters, because that was a time when America was building, America was becoming. America's locked in now, and that wealth is locked in now. So what do you do when that wealth was locked in and you were locked out? Well, you have to say you owe me, because you were supposed to pay me not only for intellectual property that you stole, not only for land that you stole. Remember, there were no rights that Black people had that white people were bound to respect. So I can come take your mule. I can come take you got a recipe? I'm going to take that intellectual property and make it my own. We built empires. We just don't own those empires. And so what we're saying is that a debt is owed. You owe us. And that's the only way we survive. We have to have a sense of urgency at this moment, because how we survive and then thrive, because you got to survive before you thrive. You got to make sure you are not annihilated first before you talk about thriving. And that's where we are. And that is what ADOS stands for. We stand for a Black agenda, which includes everyone. But the heartbeat of our agenda is reparations, because a debt is owed. And that's what we stand for. And that's what we stand by. And that's going to have a reverberating effect to the whole diaspora. But what we stand for in terms of our mission is the debt that America owes ADOS.
It's interesting, Dr. Carnell, and I'm going to go over to Reverend Dr. Gilbert out of DC, but it's interesting. Somebody already mentioned it. Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, when he talked about insufficient funds. And tonight I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. We recall that on that April 4th evening, that the day that Dr. King was killed. And there are many, Dr. Carnell and many, Dr. Gilbert, who believe that Dr. King was killed because he began to talk about economic empowerment and economic justice. He didn't talk about just the customer side of the cash register. He was talking about owning the cash register. But Dr. Gilbert, how do we reconcile? Dr. Carnell talked about resurrection, but how do we reconcile the church, the Black church, with something that some folk may seem, when we talk about reparation, radical within the church? How do we reconcile that, Dr. Gilbert?
Well, thank you, Pastor Gray. I think we have to continue to push the envelope, and like I used the football analogy, to continue to try to push the football down the field, even if you go, yard by yard. I remember as a young boy having a conversation with my parents about reparations, and they said to me, "Oh, that'll never happen." And so it is now a conversation that's taking place that folks can really start to see and grasp their mind around, and how that looks. People have different views on, but it's because folks like ADOS and folks like folks from the Progressive National Baptist Convention and other organizations have continued to keep the conversation going, that that we're here today and having a real conversation about how it can take place. But one of you asked, how can it happen? We have to understand that there's really just a tale of two views. There's a tale of two views from the white community, and there's a view from the Black community. The white community feels that it's so far away, that what happened in slavery is so far away that it doesn't impact, slavery doesn't impact what
I don't know why.
But one of the worst things ourselves as an identity, as an institution, as is the institution that wronged us, and then multi-generational oppression after that, everything from Reconstruction, Jim Crow. So you have to anchor people in that identity first. Because if they see themselves as just American, I'm just like a white person, just like an Asian person, and they won't understand what is happening. The second thing you have to do is you have to anchor them in the urgency of this moment. There's a reason why most of when you talk about Rockefeller, Carnegie, all these people, even when you talk about Bill Gates, when you talk about Steve Jobs, all these people who came about, they came about in very specific eras when America was building a very specific thing. And you have to show them that we're a specific group and we're locked out and we built the country. You have to use that as leverage to help them understand where we are and what we're owed. And I think that is the starting point. Build a thing, I can do a thing. It doesn't matter, every people did it way back when, I can do it. No. They were building railroads because America needed railroads. America don't need no more railroads. America got everything it needed, right? And now we're locked out of the thing that we were trying to build all the time. Everybody else got locked in. Irish, Italian, everybody got made white. They were never white till they got here. They were Italian, they were Irish, they were whatever. They were Sicilian, even within Italy. They never got white till they got here. They got locked into an upper caste and we got locked into a bottom caste. And you have to express that urgency to people to help them understand that, listen, it's now or never. 400 years is up, okay? The 400 years is up. It's now or never. We have to do our thing right now and make our move right now. I think that is the beginning of helping people to understand what we have to do and how we have to move.
All right. Thank you very much. And going to Dr. Philip K. James, and before this question, Dr. James, for any of the other panelists on the issue of reparation, which is our first segment, if you have something that you wish to add, if you have a question that you want to ask one of the presenters, just put that in the chat or raise your hand using the mechanism down in the lower left-hand corner, I believe that's where, or in the chat, and Nicole will make sure that she notifies us, but we're gonna make sure we get around and give everybody an opportunity to speak on this. Dr. James, Senior Pastor, Mount Zion Baptist Church.
Thank you, Dr. Gray, and I'm appreciative of the words that Yvette Carnell shared. You see that the root of the church is couched in who Jesus Christ was. And when you look at his inauguration speech, Luke 4:18 and 19, he talked about the Spirit of the Lord is upon him to preach good news to the poor. And Jesus was always about dealing with the oppressed. Well, there's no question that we as a people have been oppressed and left out of everything that would help us to be all that God created us to be. So for the church to be involved, it is really unnatural because the church is all about uplifting the community and individuals, families to be everything that God created us to be. And so if there are systems in place, people in place that are hindering that, our gospel faith says that we must speak truth to that power and do what we can in terms of mobilization, coming together to change and make a difference so that our people and all people can, as was stated, survive so that we can thrive, to rise up so that we can, to raise us up so that we can then rise up to be all that God would have us to be.
Thank you, Dr. James. Marlon Watson, president of ADOS out of Chicago. What have been the barriers, though, to people grasping the notion that reparation is possible? What have been those barriers, Marlon?
To me, I think, and I'm excited to see this panel come to fruition, because I don't think we can do what we're trying to do without the Black church, to be honest with you. We do have other Black institutions, but the Black church is the only institution that is solely controlled and owned by us. And so I don't think we see what we're trying to accomplish without the Black church. So I would suggest that the impediment as it relates to people grasping the concept of reparations is the absence of the Black church. I really believe that. I really believe since Dr. King that there hasn't been a movement that comes from the church that can actually play that role. And that's what convinced America that civil rights was the right thing to do, the Black church. And so to see Dr. King's denomination, the PNBC, connecting with ADOS and picking up the mantle that Dr. King left is, in my opinion, is what's going to actually make this happen. I don't see us doing this without the church. I see us working hard and pushing hard, but we have to have the Black church to get this across the finish line. And that's why I'm super excited about this union. So,
thank you, Dr. Greer.
May I interject, Dr. Gray?
Yes, please go ahead.
With what Brother Marlon just stated, I totally agree. I think one of the things that we need is a shift in our politics. There was a time that we were happy with just seeing African Americans or people who listened or heard or showed up in our communities to rise into political leadership. But then once they got into leadership, they didn't do much for us. And now I think it's time that that's no longer acceptable, and that we need to shift our political agenda, that just being in the seat and recognizing us is no longer acceptable, but demanding that we have an agenda and we have something to come to fruition. Is now the time that the church, the Black church specifically, has to demand a radical adjustment in politics. And I think that is a hard discussion for, if you look at even how we have been dealing with in this year with policing and reform. I don't even use the word reform, I use the word reimagine. And that's hard for some to deal with, to reimagine how the police should be, because it's a radical adjustment. And we need to now demand for our politicians to not just come to our churches or come to our communities and say, we hear you, but to actually have some type of agenda. I say, and it's a radical statement, but Obama did more for everyone else. That say specifically, I did this for the Hispanics, I did this for the homosexual community, I did this for this group and that group. But what can he specifically say that he did for the descendants of African slaves?
I want to. I'm sorry, I got you, Dr. Gilbert, but I want to, but I do want to stay in that vein because you said it. Common agenda. Black church must demand the adjustment. But Dr. Greer, who within the Black church then, whose responsibility is it, as Dr. Gilbert said, to demand the adjustment? Is it the church leadership that's going to demand the adjustment or teach or preach that adjustment? Or is it the congregation rising up from below to say to the church, as Dr. Bernice King once said, that the church has got to become more relevant, more real, relevant, and reachable? Dr. Greer, where does that impetus come from? How do we begin creating that demand?
Well, Dr. Gray, it begins, it's a hard pill to swallow, but it begins at the head. It begins at the leadership. It begins at the shepherd. And the church has to really understand that reparation talking is biblical. It's in the book of Numbers. It's talking about and defines in the book of Numbers that you shall pay a reparation to those that you have offended or you have done wrong. Well, there it is. It's simplified right there, that the church be preaching and speaking on that and telling our congregation, telling our children, and everyone that's involved in the ministry, hey, this is the new theology, the new direction. We need to talk about reparations, and we need to talk about the African American is owed a debt. And there's nothing wrong with talking about it. And like, I agree with everyone who's been saying that it begins with the church. It has to begin with the church movement. And we need to change and get more involved in social justice. I'm trying to walk delicately than the other direction we were going about 10 years ago. So I agree wholeheartedly. It's a biblical mandate that we should address reparations.
I know Pastor Kevin Cosby is on now, one of the other founding members. Pastor Cosby, welcome to the discussion. I don't know how much of it you've heard, but Marlon and others, everybody seems excited that ADOS and the work of ADOS seems to have found a listening ear within the church. And I know you've been working on this for a while. If you don't mind, just give us some history as far as your history and your experience as relates to bringing ADOS and quote unquote the Black church together. And then after that, we're going to go over to Sister Roslyn Mickens because we have a different question that may be more gender specific. Dr. Cosby.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Marlon and those who are responsible for convening this discussion. It's an honor to be engaged with you today, and so glad to see Yvette Carnell with us, who is on my Mount Rushmore of all-time great leaders. But anyway, I think that Dr. King once said you have to get the language right. He said you have to get the language right. And I think that language is very important. For example, I don't identify as an African American, for example. I identify exclusively as a American descendant of slavery. I have roots in Africa, but I have all my fruits in America. So part of the language for me, ADOS is simply three things. And I say this wherever I go. It's three things. It's identification, it's concentration, it's reparations. If you can get those three things straight, just like an airplane has, when an airplane lands, an airplane, if it's going to land, has to have three things in place. One, nose up. Two, wings straight. Three, wheels down. And that's the only way it's going to land or it's going to crash. Our people will crash if we don't answer three questions. The identification question, who are we? The concentration question, what should be our focus? And then thirdly, the reparation question, what is owed us? What is our justice claim? And I came to realize, as you said, biblically speaking, especially when you read the book of Genesis chapter 15, throughout the book of Exodus, the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Numbers, the New Testament, the story of David when he's confronted with Uriah, the Hittite, because David took another man's wife, and David said, such a man as this should pay fourfold and deserves to die. The story of Zacchaeus. So it's all rooted in scripture. Justice, sadiqwa, the Hebrew word, is all throughout scripture. In fact, the 23rd Psalm in the original Hebrew Bible does not say he leads me in the paths of righteousness. The original Hebrew Bible, 23rd Psalm says he leads me in the paths of justice. When Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, the original Greek is not righteousness. It says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his justice, and all these other things shall be added unto you. And the reason why other things will be added is because when you do justice, then you get things added to you when you do justice. So I think that the Black church is the mother of our institutions. And if the Black church does not get back to what its original founding was about, You know, the Black church came into existence for Black people to address Black issues. Every Black denomination came into existence, from the AME to AME Zions to Baptist. All of them came into existence in order to speak about the need for justice for ADOS. So that's been my pilgrimage, and I'm all in. And I'm looking forward to partnering with other pastors to speak for those who don't have a voice. And I close with this. My administrative assistant, Sherry Mills, used that scripture about Jesus where it says, and Jesus was moved with compassion because the people were like sheep without a shepherd. And for the masses of Black people, ADOS people, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who don't have a shepherd, sheep without a shepherd, and they are vulnerable and susceptible to the wolves. And sometimes God has to use people who outside the church to do the work of the church. Mm-hmm. And I thank God for Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, because they have been shepherds sometimes when people such as myself have not been. So.
Thank you, Pastor Cosby. Sister Roslyn Mickens, lead educator, artist, writer, photographer, painter, jewelry designer, activist. Okay, woo. Training the trainer. We've heard from Dr. James. We've heard from Pastor James, Pastor Tyler, Pastor Cosby, Pastor Gilbert. We've heard from the pastors where it should come from. Pastor, someone said that it may make people feel uncomfortable, but this is going to have to start from the top. But if you're not used to this discussion, you can't teach what you don't know. How do you train the trainer? When we talk about, is there a template? Is there a pilot project? Is there certain, and I know Dr. Crosby talked about the biblical language, but then now, what exists if today, two conventions, the AME Zion, the Baptists, whomever said, we're ready to do this, but we need the language. We need the template. We are the messenger. Give us the message. Sister Roslyn, where do we go?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me on this panel. I want to thank Brother Marlon and the entire panelists. Thank you so much, sir, for that question. One of the things that I suggest that anybody do, especially, I mean, I've been reaching out to, I'm in the DMV region, DC, Maryland, Virginia, is that one of the things I was brought up in the church, and I know that that's our institution. That is something where we go to the well and replenish from a hard week, a hard life, things that have been happening as ADOS. And one of the things that I've been looking at as far as educating our own is, why can't we set up things in the church as far as being able to teach the pastor, the deacon board? And if they like what they're hearing, because I'm sure many of them do in the ADOS churches, then they're giving us permission to set up other classes. We have like an ADOS 101 template or curriculum where we can break things down to people. If they say, well, we're all flat Black, because that's how I was raised. So when I heard my sister Yvette Carnell get on and say that we weren't, I pushed against it, because that's what I was taught, and one of the things that I had been through, and even in the 80s and 90s with hip hop, we were taught that we're flat Black, right? And that's one of the things that I had an issue with until it was explained. Then the scales fell from my eyes, and it all made sense. And I, unlike maybe many other people that are ADOS, I got to see certain things firsthand. In other words, when I would speak to some of my brothers and sisters from Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, their relatives would look at me a certain kind of way, like, oh no, until I spoke French to them. Then they were like, oh, you can speak my language. And I was like, it's not actually your language, it's the French. and they came into your country, I know, and were colonized it. So that's when things started making a lot of more sense to me. I didn't feel like I was alone, and I understood more and more. And we call Yvette lovingly Yvette from Carnell University. But anytime she got me to open my eyes, I mean, you have to submit to knowledge. You have to submit to truth. And once you see it, you cannot go back. So that's one of the things that put a fire under me. And I have people that are angry and upset, and many of them are in the D9. I'm in the D9. I pledged a while ago, undergrad, but it's like you can't get angry at me because I'm showing you the truth. And I know it's sort of like a matrix thing. So to answer your question, I wish that we would be able to set up within our areas of where we are throughout the country, maybe have 101 classes, break down these barriers, because these are our people. We need to start doing things in our community that are reaching out to the people directly, and they don't feel that it's just online. They know that we're there and we can connect easier.
Ibrahim, Tanner, I mean, basically same question. And I'm looking at your picture. You look about 50 years younger than I am. You're out of Indianapolis, co-chair. But basically same question, because maybe and in that question, does it make a difference the generation that we're speaking to? Sister Roslyn talked about the 101, but does it make a difference the generation?
No, it doesn't. Thank you for having me on this panel, everybody. It doesn't make a difference the generation. It doesn't even make a difference what religious sector you come from. I myself am Muslim. I was born Muslim, but I tell everybody, Dr. Kevin Cosby is my pastor because he's speaking truth to justice, right? It translates. It's a unifying message. The message of ADOS, the message that Tone and our sister Yvette has been able to give us is a unifying message, right? We have Muslims, we have atheists, we have Christians, and when I go to the Islamic Center, I'm speaking ADOS, right? I know they want to preach from the Quran, but I'm like, hey, this is what's most important. This is what's pivotal, right? When I go to churches, right, I'm speaking the ADOS gospel. I don't think the age makes a difference as far as the message go, but sometimes the messenger makes a difference as far as who can understand that message and how well he conveys that message to younger people. Myself, I use my background and some of the things that I've been through to convey to certain people that wouldn't normally be in the church, wouldn't normally be in a masjid, wouldn't normally even be at a political meeting. And you know, you just have to meet people where they are. And that's why I'm so grateful for this message that Yvette Carnell has been able to give us, because it allows different people from different facets of life to get this message and then go out into the field of the masses and kind of spread this message. And I do believe we need the church because it's easier to push back on individuals. It's hard, like me being in Indianapolis, Indiana, you can come after me. It would be hard for you to come after Mount Zion Baptist Church. It would be hard for you to come after right? So that's pretty much my response.
Thank you. JeCorey Arthur, I know you're going to have to leave soon down in Kentucky doing your thing. One of the things that Ibrahim talked about is message versus messenger. And before we leave this topic in a few minutes, after you, going back to Yvette, going back to Dr. Cosby, but the messenger versus the message. Ibrahim is Muslim. ADOS is an entity made up of people coming from all walks of life. But now you're going into an environment where you don't have all of that diversity, all of diversity. JeCorey, once again, Ibrahim talked about the messenger versus the message. Is the message of ADOS getting weakened, or at least not even getting an audience because of the quote unquote messengers?
Well, what ADOS did for me here locally in Louisville is it put me into political office, and I am the first elected official who identifies as ADOS. In January, I take office as the Metro Councilman for District 4, a district that encompasses our downtown business district and all of the surrounding neighborhoods. A district that you can say is the quote unquote most diverse, most vibrant and populated, but it's also the district with the highest poverty rate, homeless rate, crime rate, unemployment rate. And I will oversee this district and represent it come January. And I got into office by standing on an ADOS platform where we not only presented people ideas, but we presented people data, and I anchored my campaign in that data and made it very clear the reality that you think you live in, where I live in a neighborhood where the poverty rate is 52.7%, but we have murals all over the place, and that makes us feel good. I told all of the constituents, all of the residents, I don't want you to just feel good. I want you to actually be good. I want you to actually live good. And when you look at Louisville at a microscopic level locally, we're only a quarter of the population, but we are 3/4 of suspension rates. We are over 3/4 of the detention rates for the youth detention center that we just had closed, which was 77% young Black men. And we are 78%, over 3/4 of the unhoused, homeless, unsheltered rates. So reparations for us, of course, nationally across the entire country, but also locally from a city government level, is not only something we are owed, something we want, but also something that we absolutely need. Because over the course of these 400 years, we've been getting displaced all over, pushed into ghettos, pushed out of ghettos and gentrified. We've been getting replaced by people who are non-ADOS, who look like us, but don't share the same lineage as us. And if we don't do something about this wealth gap, that's really a wealth gulf, we will get erased. And this is exactly the message I'm going to tell to our local Black caucus when I take office. And I'm going to make sure that our politics are anchored in being ADOS. And I'm glad to be here, by the way.
Thank you very much, JeCorey. Davell Powell, outreach chair out of Detroit. I mean, when JeCorey talks about economic depression, I think that when we look throughout the Midwest, most of our cities within the Midwest, from St. Louis, Kansas City, Detroit, Chicago, Indy, Gary, Indy, you name it, we've become that place. But Brother Powell, ideas versus data. When people talk about reparation, when we say reparation, are we talking about reinvestment into Black communities, or as maybe Dr. Carnell or Yvette would say, investment, not reinvestment, because you never invest anything. But is that what we're talking about? Reparation equals reinvestment or investment in Black community. And then after you, I got one last question on this that I'm going to pose to Yvette and Dr. Cosby, but Brother Powell?
Yeah, no, thank you sincerely for having me on this panel today. I really appreciate the opportunity to express what we're seeing here on the ground from Detroit. And what you said hit it right on. Detroit is a weather vane for not only the Midwest, but for this country, but more importantly for the Black community, because Detroit is the Blackest major city in this country. People associate that with Atlanta, but Detroit, by percentage-wise, represents most of the, how would I say, as Yvette says, the accrued disadvantage, and it manifests itself in every corner of the city. And also, as was expressed about Louisville, we have a mid-center which is just being whitened, basically, and being replaced with people who don't look like us, but they say they want to be part of the city. Now, to the point of investment versus reinvestment, Detroit was a city that was invested in at one point by a different group of people, and now it's being divested and being ran out to the suburbs. The new investments are coming in that don't look like us. So when we talk about reparations for the Black community, because this city is majority Black, overwhelmingly Black, that means investment. That means that first time investment that actually deals with the people who live here, the people who undergird this city, the people who undergird this entire metro area, in a sense, the Black community. So this is a first time investment. And one thing I wanted to touch on that was spoken on earlier is how we educate people about ADOS. An important thing that we run into here in Detroit, because it's so Black and there's so much about a diversity of the Black community here, is that there's this idea of Pan-Africanism that's almost baked into people's psyche right at the age of coming out of school. So at high school, and especially coming out of college, these people have this mindset. And so they refuse to accept anything that's going to delineate the native Black, or rather the people who descended from American slavery, from any other Black immigrant group that has come to this country. And so anytime you talk about reparations, they're receptive to reparations, but they're not receptive to an idea of identifying the Black community that has the accrued disadvantage, that is owed this debt for over 400 years, that is supposedly supposed to only go to this group versus the others who are also making up the Black community. That's where the fight we see and the biggest challenge we see. So having the churches backing in that is going to be monumental and helping people start to open their eyes and listen, because as soon as they hear about ADOS as an identity, they like it. But when they hear that the reparations only goes to ADOS, you have to take them all the way back to Civics 101. But yes, investment is the priority. That is the only thing that's going to work in the city for the Black community and for the cities to invest in the Black people. And it is the first time investing, because everything else has been trinkets and handouts that really don't represent long-term growth for this community. It never was there.
Powerful night, powerful night. We're going to transition into the second part of this when we talk about political empowerment, but I want to go back to Yvette. Yvette, a lot of people, and similar to what Brother Powell said, and we're going to ask you this question, Dr. Cosby, and Dr. Gilbert, in that order to respond. The how, the formula, who determines, where does it come from? Are we talking about legislation that is going to make this determination, or at least implement this the determination? But the formula, the how, where does it come from? That's a question that seemingly everybody is saying, okay, reparation, but from who? From Bill Gates? From Donald Trump? And so how do we respond to that? You, Dr. Cosby, Dr. Gilbert.
Well, I think the way you begin responding to that is understanding how was slavery made possible? How was Jim Crow made possible? Wasn't it the federal government that did that? Wasn't it the federal government that pulled out after Jim Crow and left us to the KKK, right? When they instituted black codes and made us second-class citizens and stripped us of everything that the Civil War was supposed to be fought about. So I think that has to be the beginning. I'm not talking about, I have never said that there are things that cannot happen after that, or corporations or institutes that you can't go after that. But when you look at it, America decided, listen, we're gonna have to have a bottom group. We're going to have a bottom caste in this country, and we're going to use race to fasten this group to the bottom. The government did that. Our federal government did that, right? And everybody else played along and was with it because it benefited everybody to do that. All the other groups that came in, and they came, whether you were Irish, whether you were Italian, you came, you said, oh, the game I have to play, I just have to be white. And be white means I have to kick the snot out of ADOS all the time and make sure they stay on the bottom, and that means I stay up here. And so I think when you talk about that, you have to make that clear. And even what the brother just said, I appreciated the comment. It was wonderful. In terms of Pan-Africanism, that to me is kind of anchored in a lostness that we have. We have a black agenda, but reparations is the heartbeat of that agenda. The black agenda includes everyone, but the heartbeat is reparations. Like that's the same thing, the heart of the whole body, because that is the debt that is owed. That is the debt that is owed in terms of what has been stripped from us. And you have to encounter that with no hatred towards a black immigrant or anybody else. We don't have disdain. We're just talking about what is fact in terms of what happened to a specific group in this country. And I think when you really talk to them in that way, we have a lot of black immigrants who've been calling in, and they say, yeah, it makes sense. We agree, we see it, and we don't understand why other people don't see it. And there's a whole grift coming on. It's almost like you see everything now is a new black. Gay is the new black, Latino is the future, everything is everything, but we never got a chance to get, so everybody else is shoehorning into our justice claim that we haven't got. And at a certain point, you have to say, listen, we're a specific group with a specific justice claim. You have to explain it, and you can't explain it with any kind of animosity. You have to just say, this is what it is, and this is how we move from here. And this is why the debt is owed to this specific group, especially in terms of who was here at a specific point. You saw Black immigration came majoritively post 1965 with that Immigration Act. So you say, wait a minute, well, we were here 1619, built the country. That's a specific debt. And I think you have to kind of try to explain that to people with a degree of compassion, because everybody's been brought up how they've been brought up. But you have to do it that way. And I think you have to begin with the federal government. I think a lot of these, small town, small city things that have been done, I think they have the right intention sometimes. But what happens is you can't do it that way. See, if you do it in a way where we definitely should have investment in our communities, but that's just because we're citizens. Like, citizens deserve investment. You have divested from us for all the wrong reasons, but citizenship makes that. There's a whole second investment in terms of wealth and the building of wealth and closing the racial wealth gap, which is really a lineage wealth gap, because there are a lot of brown people who got money. So when you talk about that, we have to have wealth as individual families, and you have to invest in this community that you have divested from. There's a lot of work America got to do.
Thank you, Don. We're gonna pivot a bit. We're gonna come back in the last to deal with another question that just keeps burning at me. But let's pivot a little bit to political empowerment, because, as Yvette says, as everyone said, JeCorey just got elected. There are some that say, well, ADOS pushes political empowerment from the bottom up and not the top down. Does it matter, Dr. Cosby, if this political empowerment is a bottom-up initiative or a top-down initiative? What are your thoughts? Followed by Dr. Gilbert and then Dr. Scott, Reverend Scott.
Well, I think that if you're ADOS, you're automatically bottom down. So all of us who are in ADOS, the masses of us, are basically at the bottom. So it's a bottom-down movement. Someone asked a question, Doc, about where can we become educated? There has already an organization of churches, a collaboration of churches, has already started. It's called the National Coalition of Churches for Reparations. The National Coalition of Churches for Reparations. And they have a webpage that's powerful. It's nccfr, nccfr.org. And it's affiliated with Simmons College of Kentucky, which is an HBCU, which is a real ADOS HBCU. So any information that any questions or concerns you might have, and our hope is that we would all come together under the umbrella of the National Coalition of Churches for Reparations. And you can find out more about that webpage, and maybe we can have a follow-up Zoom discussion about it. But let me say this, and then I'll pass to Dr. Gilbert. And that is, now he's deceased, brilliant scholar, leaned more towards the Pan-Africanist movement in the 1990s. But he has given, in my opinion, and I've read Darity and I've heard so many people, but the greatest definition that I have heard on reparations, if you want a good definition, it comes from the brilliant Dr. Amos Wilson. I don't know if you guys have heard of Amos Wilson. Yeah. But Amos Wilson says this, and it is so profound. He says, justice requires not only the ceasing and desisting of injustice, but also requires reparations for injustices and damages inflicted for prior wrongdoing. The essence of justice is the redistribution of gains earned through the perpetration of injustice. If restitution is not made and reparations not instituted to compensate for prior injustices, those injustices are in effect rewarded. and the benefits of such rewards conferred on the perpetrators of injustice will continue to draw interest, to be reinvested and be passed on to their children, who will use their inherited advantages to continue to exploit the children of the victims of the injustices of their ancestors. Consequently, injustice and inequality will be maintained across the generations, as well as the delirious social, economic, and political outcomes. Profound.
Amen.
So it's
We have that in.
Yeah, it's more than
Yep.
just ceasing and
Mhm.
desisting, he's saying.
Right.
It is justice demands that if you benefited financially because of your crime, that you should not be able to do that. And America has benefited because of the crime. And Zacchaeus was told, he said, look, I'm gonna give a half of my goods to the poor. If I defrauded anyone, I'm gonna restore them fourfold. That's to me, that's the essence, the core of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Dr. Cosby. Dr. Gilbert, I want to go back to this too. We're still talking about the fears that people have in forming relationships oftentimes deal with difference. The fear of that which is different. Again, how do we bring in this idea, this ideal? How do we bring in this data and make it work for the Black church? Dr. Gilbert and Dr. Scott, same question to you.
Well, what you're asking is for a shaking of the foundation that America was built on, and that, quite frankly, that some of our founding organizations were built on. This conversation just simply hasn't really taken a foothold in the past 50 or 60 years. And for this generation, this organization to come and say, hey, we want to be front and center, and nobody's going to tell us to be quiet. It's shaking everybody. It's shaking white folk, it's shaking Black folk. And what reparations is really asking is for powerful folk, is for a willingness to relinquish power. That's what reparations is asking, for a willingness to relinquish power, or civil war. That's how civil wars start. And so the reason why white Jews are powerful is because America decided we were going to relinquish power to them, and we now give them billions of dollars and allow them to make decisions for America because they have decided to relinquish power. And that's something that is shaking. What we're talking about will shake America, will shake, organizations, because this is not, it has never happened. It was supposed to happen, but it never happened. And so you're saying, why can't this seemingly we get this communication going? Is because we're talking about lobbying positions of power. Mm-hmm. And when you think about who in our community is perceived as powerful and who are the gatekeepers, how will that adjust their positions?
Gotcha. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. Dr. Scott, political empowerment. Do we start at the bottom? Do we start at the top? What do you think should be our initial if not our initial point of contact, where should we be putting our energy to if we're going to push the ideal and the data and the reality based upon this justice claim that reparation is something that is owed to us? Where do we begin politically? Dr. Scott?
Thank you, Reverend Gray, for the opportunity to share. I am representing Kalamazoo, Michigan, Galilee Baptist Church. And I would say I agree with what Roslyn said earlier. It's going to start with education in the Black church. The pastors, someone said it earlier, shepherds, the pastors, the deacons, getting them on board. But I would also venture to say from the bottom up, but I think we need to make some efforts to involve the young adults, the millennials, those members of our community that are at the forefront, but in many instances, they're not feeling connected with the church. So here in Kalamazoo, we really have a strong movement of young adults, the late 20s, 30s, that would really benefit from the training, the teaching, understanding what ADOS is. And those are, I believe, would be our foot soldiers in this movement, as opposed to those who I think someone else said, their parents said, oh, well, that'll never happen. I think we deal with a lot of that. I see a lot of that as a pastor that's progressive and that is engaging in social justice, even from some of the local pastors in the city. Mm-hmm. But I think we really need to tap into those young people and that next generation that are waiting for the Black church's involvement, and we feel that they could, that's something they could really latch on to. But they need to be equipped and empowered with the tools necessary in order to speak to these issues. So I would say start with the millennials and start with the young adults.
Okay. Dr. James, within our own, it's always been, since we got here, our own internal prejudice. Dr. Gilbert talked about, I think it was Dr. Gilbert that used the word gatekeeper so that I don't get in trouble. I think Dr. Gilbert is the one that used the word gatekeepers. But we're talking now about a political agenda, about creating a political agenda that includes the word reparation. How do we forward that? The Black church that's not been one of our agenda items. We've had a lot of, and maybe it wasn't, we just didn't call it that. Dr. James, how do we do it? What do you say? What does Reverend Dr. Philip K. James, senior pastor of the historic Mount Zion Baptist Church, what do you say to your Baptist colleague sitting across the table from you who pushes back on ADOS and reparation and basically saying, as they said to Dr. King, let's do this gradually. This may be our issue. That's why we got PNBC, because some folks said to Dr. King, we're going to deal with civil rights, but gradually. How do we respond to those among us, the gatekeepers, the religious leadership, as we try to form a political agenda? How do we say to them that reparation needs to be on that a priority on that legislative agenda for Black folk?
It seems that timing is everything. And right now, it seems the climate is so right for a need to do something that's that some may consider radical, but these are radical times. I mean, COVID-19 has taken the cover off just how bad the situation is for people for our people of Black and brown and poor people. And so if you really care about your people, if you really care about the community, and this is what I would say, if you really care, then it boils down to economics. It boils down to being able to have the resources so you can get the education you want, the health care you want, the Black-owned businesses, all of that. And so how else can you make the gospel come alive that's preached on Sundays, other than trying to move together? You know, I put in the chat, the church is the one place where you have organized people, and then you have organized money. And so when you put organized people and organized money together on an agenda, you can have something happen. And so and there's something that needs to happen is the repairing of the breach, the repairing of what has totally kept us nearly annihilated had not been for the grace of God, really. And so that's my where I would come and tell people that are pushing back. You have the social justice protests going on. You have the political climate in our country that is at a stalemate, and you have the justice that just passed, and so you have all of this stuff going on. How can we capture this moment and push our agenda forward for the good of us?
Thank you. It's interesting. I think it was Asheville, North Carolina. I think their city council presented a bill on reparation. I believe it was passed. I know in Ferguson, Missouri, some people say it's the epicenter for the new civil rights movement based upon the murder of Mike Brown back on August 9th, 2014. One of the African-American or ADOS councilwomen, woman, Fran Griffin, is going to be presenting a resolution on reparation in Ferguson. And so it still goes back to, where do we begin? I know that in most of our national conventions, it seems as though the national conventions are focusing in on the national politics. And when we listen to JeCorey and Brother Powell and Brother Tanner, it seems like, and Sister Mickens, it seems like there is enthusiasm or excitement or propensity to deal with local elections versus national elections. Once again, is it either or? Is it both and? Marlon, I'm going to ask you that, or does it make a difference?
Well, first, I don't know if you guys are aware that, and we didn't plan it like this. This was supposed to happen last Saturday, but today is the Feast of Trumpets. So maybe there's some symbolism there. And I'll get to your question, but I want to add a few things here. In terms of the last question you asked, I want to touch that. This is going to have to come from the bottom up, as our brother Kevin Cosby said. All of us on the bottom anyway. So you can't come from the top down because ain't nobody up there. So it's going to come from the bottom up. And in that vein, with ADOS, Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, those are my leaders. Those are the ADOS leaders. And my prayer is that the ministers at the PNBC adopt Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore as their leaders in this space, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. They've gotten us to where we are.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Brother Marlon,
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt you, but I was going to jump in before you said that. And you literally took the words out of my mouth. What is needed? Du Bois was not a churchman. Marcus Garvey was not a churchman. Okay, but there was a church division of the of Garvey's movement. There's a church division of the NAACP. Okay, so there's a church division of the Urban League. What is needed is Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore having a platform. You know, in the book of Nehemiah, it says that they built for Nehemiah a platform of wood. For Ezra in the book of Nehemiah, a platform of wood. And who built your platform is critical.
Yes, sir.
The Jews built it for Nehemiah. MSNBC is not our platform. CNN is not our platform. We've got to create, like they created for Ezra, a platform of wood, a pulpit of wood, it says, for Antonio and for Yvette to stand. If we can get behind, as the PNBC, National Baptist Convention of America, which I'm affiliated with, NBCA, National Baptist Convention, USA America, if we can all get behind Yvette and Antonio, you'll change, things will change immediately.
Yes.
Okay. We have.
Can I dovetail off that really quickly? And so, and so just to dovetail off what Brother Cosby said, you about to make me preach now, Doc. So just to dovetail off what he said, one of the things we're doing at my church, and so let me say this first. And so, what does connecting and standing behind Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore mean in a more logistical sense? Obviously, we can do Zoom meetings like this, but they have a multitude of chapters that are all across this country. Over in DMV, you got Mickens, you got Ibrahim Tanner down in Indianapolis. You have Brother Davell in Detroit. You have myself in Chicago, and me and Pastor Keith has talked about this. We'll revisit this, but that means that you have access to these chapters, and these chapters can do meetings. Zoom meetings now because of COVID, but we can do meetings for your churches and indoctrinate them per se into the ADOS way of thinking. And that's how this thing gets to moving. And what we've done at my church is we've actually hung a sign on the front of our church that says reparations now, ADOS. Okay. And it's caused a bit of controversy, but the good thing it's done, it has brought a lot of young folk to our church. They drive down that street on 8100 Dante and they see that sign and they say, you know, because it's been a narrative for a while that that black folks leaving the church. But I've argued for a while that the church left black folk because they weren't doing things that were related to the material lives of black people. And so when young people see a reparation sign on the front of a church, that piques their interest. And so that's one of the things we're doing. Another thing we're doing is we're deeming the month of October as Reparations Month. And we're preaching reparations sermons, justice sermons, all throughout the month of October, leading all the way up until the election. And this can be a symbolic thing we could do every year just to put America on notice that this is what you owe. This is what you owe us. This is what you owe this people. This is what you owe the community that built this country. And in doing that, I just got to let you guys know, and Reverend George talked about it a bit, that this isn't going to be done without controversy. It's just not going to happen. Jesus didn't turn the world upside down without controversy. And I noticed so many parallels from Jesus taking his people, the Jews, and the world, quite to be honest with you, into the way or Christianity, from Judaism to Christianity. And the conversion story for many of us who come from the Pan-African way of defining ourselves to now the ADOS way of defining ourselves. I know there's so many parallels. In the book of Matthew 23, Jesus had it out with his folk because he wanted to take them from the old way to the new way, from the old covenant to the new covenant. And I know there's so many parallels here, but the good news is he was successful. And the good news is if we stay the course, we can do this, but it's not going to be done without controversy. And just like Jesus had issues with his people, when I say controversy, I'm not talking about white folk. That's clear. We don't have a problem with white folk. We don't have a problem with folks who identify as black. Jesus had the same issues. And so
that's why Marlon, and I guess that's why Marlon, I asked the question earlier about our own internal prejudice. But not just our own internal prejudice, but our own internal fear. And it goes directly to what you said. Other people have mentioned it. We've said it. But I haven't heard anyone saying, listen, we're trying to steal your sheep, black church. We're not trying to steal your flock, Baptist or AME or AME Zion, what we're trying to do is help you feed your sheep. And so when you say that make them leaders in that space, not in the pulpit space, not in the preaching space, but make them leaders in that economic justice, economic empowerment space that strengthens your flock. That's what I'm hearing. Don't get me to preaching.
Yeah,
so we're going to ask. So this is where we're going to go with these last few minutes. We've got, where do we go from here? So we're going to go around. I'm leaving. Dr. James is going to be the absolute last one for us, and Yvette's going to be right before him. So I'm going to go around and ask for everybody a 1 minute. Now, don't make me cut your mic off now. I'm just joking. But before I say it, because when we do that, and when Dr. James finishes, that'll be the end. I want to thank you all for the discussion, for beginning this. And I particularly want to thank the pastors on here for not being afraid to come out of the comfort zone. And more of us are going to need to do that, either willingly or unwillingly, because we have a nation, a Black nation, a community that is starving literally. And Dr. King's words, and I'm a member of PNBC, have been all of my day and will always be, for a lot of reasons, but particularly because of Dr. King. And when I remember injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and we build alliances based upon necessity, not necessarily desirability, which simply means there are some things I won't understand. There are some things I may disagree with. There are some things I need to maybe learn more about. But while I'm doing that, this is something that we can all agree on. This is our starting point. And that's why that particular quote from Dr. King for this discussion, because of our own internal prejudices and our fears and all of that, was important. So in 1 minute, 1 minute apiece, we're gonna go around. I know it's gonna be hard, but I know y'all can do it. Starting with Ibrahim. 1 minute, where do we go from here? You still with us, Ibrahim? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. For us in Indianapolis, it's reparations or bust, especially due to COVID-19. And we're gonna just start locally. I mean, here in Indianapolis, due to COVID-19, I think it presented America with a possibility to speed up the progress of what I would call Negro removal. So while Blacks have a 35% home ownership, pretty much making us renters, we are facing heavy evictions in Indianapolis. Indianapolis has more evictions than Chicago and LA combined. We're second behind New York City in America. So you see us struggling to make rent payment, but we're having a seller's market, right? Whites are sustaining America's as far as buying homes, right? You see Indianapolis takes that approach and say, hey, we're just going to move past Black people and Black issues. We're 30% of this city, right? So they're building hotels and bars for white Indy. We're having our third prison being built, right? Jail in Indianapolis, right? We're a city less than 1 million people, right? So for us, it's reparations or bust. Either we do something now, or we just gonna cease to exist.
Thank you, Brother Ibrahim. And I said a minute only because I knew a couple of y'all would take a minute and a half. Reverend Gilbert, and really, but it's necessary. So thank you very much. Reverend Gilbert.
So I put it back on ADOS. I challenge ADOS to do the work, the organizing work, to reach out, even though you've reached out before and probably have met with them before and done everything already. You're gonna have to do it again and keep pushing and meeting with the gatekeepers and keep marketing and branding and keep messaging. And I look at it like this. Just 2 years ago, we weren't having the same conversation about policing that we are now, but it was because we kept doing what we were doing. We didn't do anything differently. We just kept being steady and kept pushing. And so what I say is to all of us, but specifically to ADOS, who is directly in the front line of this fight, is to keep doing what you're doing and stay humble in what you're doing, because in one instance, the ceiling may crack and you may see daylight.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. JeCorey, are you still with us? I think he had to leave. Is JeCorey still with us? Marlon?
Yes.
Where do we go from here?
So,
In one.
a few things. Join the site, the coalition site Dr. Cosby talked about. We're going to be joining that site as well. Dr. Cosby, me and my pastor's church. So join that site. 2, invite ADOS chapters and Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore to your churches. We got to do it Zoom now, but let's do it that way. We do Zoom meetings every Sunday with ADOS Chicago. So wherever your churches are located, if it's in Indiana, DC, Detroit, connect with those folks and let's get ADOS in their teaching. 3, make October Reparations Month. Imagine preaching reparations all throughout the month of October until we get this thing done and putting America on notice. 4, I got 2 more points and I'll let it go. 4, become quid pro quo like Jesus. Jesus was a quid pro quo kind of guy. I think in Matthew 12, they asked Jesus, they said, Jesus, who is your mother and who is your father? Jesus said, those who do the will of my Father who is in heaven. So the church got to become as shrewd as Christ in that sense and say those who are doing the will of our community, that's who we give our allegiance to. And lastly, we need to really recognize who we are in terms of economically. I think a lot of us think we're the good Samaritan. We, as Black folk, we always want to help folk, and there's nothing wrong with that. But once we start to realize that we're the person the good Samaritan was helping, I think it'll kind of change some things and help us know that we got to do something about our condition economically.
Thank you very much. Davell?
Yeah, so real quick, 4 points coming out of Detroit. The first thing is that I want to reach back to what the pastor said earlier about organizations with money and people who are organizers. We got to plug in with these existing organizations and continue to push the message and understanding of ADOS. We're doing that here in Detroit. That's what we call Project Takeover with a lot of these organizations. Also, secondly, we need to have feet on the ground, educating just laymen walking the street, walking the beat about what ADOS is, because knowing is half the battle and most people haven't heard of it. So we're moving that forward. Another big thing is we've had over 110 days of protests here in Detroit consistently. And what we're now doing is going into these activities and starting to educate people, because they're talking about different things that have nothing to do with the impetus for why they even are able to have protests right now. So we have to continue to move that narrative to where it should be. And last but not least, like we're talking about today, getting into the churches. It just so happens at one of our demonstrations, we were able to connect with the local or the region of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC around here. And so we're working with them, connecting with them and helping to move forward this information about ADOS. So it's really about education for us now, especially as we move through October and we get closer to ballot day.
Thank you. And Davell, keep me posted, because the president there of SCLC, is that Aaron McCarthy? Anyway, if that's Aaron and I went to school together. So however I can help. Dr. Greer?
I'm
Dr.
here,
Greer.
sir.
There you go.
I'm here, sir. All right. I want to thank you all real quickly for being on this panel. Here it is. We've been saying it all night. It's education, education, education. Our people, they suffer because of the lack of knowledge. A lot of people don't even understand about reparations. A lot of people in our own community are not aware. And so I'm always now into the point of my life that I want to educate the young people, the generations that keep coming behind us. I don't want us to lose them in this whole movement. We need to reach out, continue to teach them about reparations and the importance of it. And I am so excited that ADOS want to collaborate with the convention, with a church. It is so exciting to see that come to place. And so I hope we can continue this the Zoom meetings, education, and coming together to spread the word about ADOS.
Thank you, Dr. Greer. Sister Mickens? Sister
Hello.
Roslyn?
Yes, sir.
Hi.
I'm here. I just wanted a few things. I wanted to give you some word from the Bible that I remember from childhood. It's Proverbs. This is the King James Version. Proverbs 11:30. The fruit of the righteous is the tree of life, and he who winneth souls is wise. We need to be wise, just like Brother Marlon had stated. One of the things that we really need to do is to try to get the youth, and I was another pastor, I apologize, I don't remember your name, but to get the youth activated, the millennials, and get them activated in what we're talking about. Because if we're talking above their heads, they are not going to respond. We need to let them know that this is about them. And once they see reparations, once they see the connection, they will come back into the churches and they will participate. Because one of the things they want to do is to find that way. So I think it's all coming together under God's plan for a reason for us to even have this conversation. I'm so appreciative. And like one of the things, I've also reached out to anybody in the DMV region. We got some powerful churches here. Let's start working with our people and winning these souls over. Let's make it happen.
Thank you, Sister Roslyn. Pastor Cosby?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to commend you for doing such a great job of facilitating the discussion. But I think, you know, what we're talking about in terms of the need for education, political education, the mobilization of our people to do justice work, you cannot do that if you do not have institutional infrastructure in place. You've got to have institutional infrastructure. I would say the starting point for this, and I hope that Yvette and Antonio realize that there is an army of people in the church who have their back. I think the next move is on Antonio and Yvette to start officially an organization, an ADOS organization, the same way that we have an NAACP or an SCLC or a Operation Push or whatever Al Sharpton's organization. We need a 501c3 nonprofit institutional infrastructure so that the pastors division can come under that, and we would be mobilized as a force under Yvette's and Antonio's leadership. I think that's the next move. If we can move in that direction, then the infrastructure is what disseminates services. You have to have infrastructure to disseminate services. So that's what's missing. And I hope that Yvette, and whom I just adore, she knows that, and Antonio would really take that into consideration.
Thank you. And with that 501c3 to 501c4 as well, that allows you to be more political.
Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
so I know we have Yvette, and then obviously my leader. I want to thank Dr. Keith Tyler. He deliberately did not want to talk a lot during the discussion. He deliberately wanted the education and the information to happen. And so if you know Dr. Tyler, he's a wealth of information. So I know somebody must have tied him to his chair. I don't know what they're doing to him over there, but I want to thank him because he planted this seed. You know, the Bible is clear: one will plant, one will nurture, and God will give the increase. But he wanted to make sure that this forum took place, and I thank him for trusting me enough to put a portion of it in my hands to kind of get it through that hour and a half. And as a matter of fact, we're doing extremely well. We're almost there. And so let's do this. Let's hear from Yvette, you know, on the question, where do we go from here? Yvette, Dr. Tyler, and then we'll close with Dr. James, who will also give the benediction. So Yvette, I'm looking forward to the partnership. So you have the floor.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it, and I want to kind of second what Dr. Cosby says, and I think Dr. Cosby knows that he will be heavily involved in any C3 because I'm overtly political. So I have to back up a little bit because I get everybody in trouble. So I think what you said about the C4, I think we do need that other arm, like to do it. But I would have to be so in terms of leadership, be not as have to not be as I am over there. But yes, I think we have to move in terms of organizational structure, and we've had a lot of conversations about that. And something else that needs to happen too is that there has to be a sense of urgency. I've been thinking a lot about time, and I said, in terms of how I think about time, somebody else has already said this. It can't be just me. So I went to look it up, and I found something by James Baldwin, and James Baldwin said, listen, in terms of what you said about accommodationists, and this takes time. He said, how much time do you need? You've taken my mama's time, my grandmama's time, everybody's time you've taken, and you have not given us what is owed. And so we have to anchor in people. We don't have no more time. When you see zero wealth I don't think we have zero wealth now. I think this pandemic sped all of that stuff up that was supposed to be 2053. We are at an extremely urgent moment. And so you have to anchor that identity, but you have to also anchor the urgency, because we have people who believe that we have time that we don't have. We have to come together right now as a collective unit and move politically with one voice. We don't have time for a whole lot of fighting and carrying on. And so I think that's what we have to do. Those two things, the urgency and the anchoring of identity, they have to be coupled together for us to move forward as a collective, with the kind of might that we need to, that we're going to have to challenge the United States of America to do the right thing by us.
Thank you so much, Yvette. Dr. Tyler, my leader, and then Dr. James.
Thank you so much, Reverend Gray, and to all of the panelists. I just want to thank you all so much. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 speaks to us. The preacher speaks to us. And the Bible says there's a time for everything. Never before in American history, if not human history, have we had a world pandemic, a global pandemic, global civil unrest, and a crazy man in the White House. I believe that this is the hour for ADOS, and I furthermore believe that it will be a collective group of people. I don't think it's going to be one lane. I believe it's going to be multi. And I said that to say that we have to unteach to teach, because there are so many who are inundated with a one-track mind, thought, and teaching. And so when it comes to civil rights, you have the old school mentality and you have the young school mentality. And some of the old school are still holding the keys to the gate. And it's not that they're not aware of it, Sister Yvette and Dr. Cosby, and to all the panel. It's just that we have to work on these gates, these gatekeepers, and educate them. We must continue to also, even more so, push to get this crazy fool out of the White House. We got to have someone to work with us, even from the local level all the way up, from the bottom up. And so we've got to push real strong to make sure we come out and vote. And I'll close when I say this. Everything that we've talked about started at what I call the GKT convention. And somebody's asking, what is the GKT convention? Grandma's kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma was the matriarch. She was everything. And all of the discussions took place around Grandma's kitchen table. And so here we are today. But we stand ready to expose and to hopefully explode ADOS in spite of some of the challenges that we face, because there are all these fences, Dr. Gray, we have. And when you build a fence around yourself, you fence more out and you fence in. And so I'll close with that thought. I want to give it to my friend and brother, Dr. James, who pastors one of the most monumental churches in the state of Indiana, the Great Mount Zion Church. And I want to thank behind the scenes those, our team that is working with us, Kenny and Nicole and others. I want to give you a hand clap and thank you. And Yvette, my daughter is crazy about you. My daughter's 33. I have several grown children, and one of my daughters is 33. And I told her about you. I said, I want you to start following Yvette Carnell. She said, who is that? I said, just start following her. And every morning she calls me, come on, fam, come on, fam. So she calls me every morning. And I told her, I said, you know what? When here's what Kevin is saying. I'm gonna translate it. When you want to get a job done, you call a man. But when you want to get a job done right, you call Yvette Carnell. You call a woman. So that's really what he's trying to say. I'm just going to old school it. So we commend you for your labor of love, and we appreciate you in the Lord. And again, thank you all so much. And you're right. I wanted to kind of stay in the shadows, and you learn a lot by listening and observing. And so thank you all so much. There's more to come. We have some other ideas, some other challenges before us. So just stay tuned. We'll be coming back.
Okay. Dr. James, you have the final word, and you're going to close us with the benediction.
Again, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel, and it's been a rich discussion. And you know, for myself, I'm thankful that Ibrahim is here in Indianapolis, and we will connect and have some discussions and see how to move forward with this reparations agenda here in Indiana. And so I think for me, education is critical. When you know what you know, when you know better, basically you can do better. And so that's where I want to begin, to be educated and then help educate the congregation and others that I am able to connect with here in the city and beyond. So with that, thank all of the panelists. Again, it's been a rich discussion, and let us close in prayer and benediction. Gracious God, we give thanks for this time that we have shared together. And I pray, God, that you would breathe on it, that great fruit would come from it, that we move beyond discussion to action that's meaningful, purposeful, that will make a significant difference. So continue to minister to all of us in our places of service, and continue to give us insight and wisdom to enable your kingdom to come here on earth, even as it is in heaven. And so we thank you now. We ask your blessing upon each of us, our families, our ministries, and we give you praise. In the strong name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right,
Thank you again, everyone. Good night. Please make sure that you share this. Share it with all of your friends. I think we have over 150 some shares already, so it is going out. Make sure you put it out. People need this information. Good night, and God bless you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. God bless. Bye.
Good night.
I got to find out how. Okay, there we go.
Good night.